General Electric 18.2 cubic foot refrigerator. It was probably in the mid 2000s at some point. I don't know, what would you guess at that? I don't know. By the calculation, it's going to be consuming, I think it was about $97 a year. I think that was the figure I came to. That is a little misleading because in this house it's probably a little more natural as far as the temperatures. In the summer it's going to be warmer, in the winter it's going to be cooler. In a normal situation like that, and in my house where I don't own an air conditioner, the summer is definitely warmer in the house and the winter is definitely colder. The refrigerator is going to work a lot harder in the summer because it's warmer in the room and it has to work harder to keep the food cooler. In the winter there's a little less work because the air is cooler and it doesn't have to work as hard. The other thing is that when I was doing this testing, I don't think I opened the door. Every time we opened the door, we're going to lose a little energy. And if he was in here cooking and stuff, the door's going to be open quite a bit. So that $97 is probably more like $110 or $115 when you factor in the real life situation. Because that measurement I took was during a period when he wasn't home and we weren't able to measure through the summer and the fall and the winter and all that. So we just did the wintertime test. So really this is pretty much the best case scenario. This thing is costing us $97 a year. Realistically, as I said, it might be $115 or $120 or something like that. The new refrigerator, which it's not just a factor of looking at energy, but it's also a factor of looking at features too, like glass shelves, enough room in the refrigerator to be able to store the amount of food you need. That's not really an issue, the stainless steel versus color or whatever, but a particular energy level model may not be that available in certain colors, but it's just a matter of personal preference. What you need to do really is look at Energy Star Certified Label, which is the government program where they actually test a complete variety of appliances, dishwashers, washing machines, refrigerators, microwaves, just all sorts of things, and they will rate them as Energy Star. If they comply with the Energy Star requirements, they'll be rated as such, and then within that there's 3 tiers, Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. Tier 1 is less efficient, but still more efficient than an average, and then Tier 2 and Tier 3. And of course, as the tiers go up, the cost goes up too. Very rarely do people stock the kind of upper tier appliances. You have to order them, and that's part of our problem here is that we narrowed it down to 3 or 4 refrigerators, but they won't be here till March 10th at the earliest, so that's why it's not here. But we've chosen one, or at least narrowed down the choice to one that's 18.2 or 18.3 cubic feet, so it's about the same size. Instead of that one little bulb, it has LED lights within it. As opposed to $125 a year, it's going to be using $54 a year for the same cooling capacity. That particular one only cost $986. I found another one that used $55 worth of energy a year that cost only $78. So you don't have to, it did not have LED lighting, by the way, but you don't have to pay a premium to get a decent Energy Star rated Tier 1 refrigerator. Many are available below $1,000. This particular one we were looking at also has a cold environment capability. If you want to store your eggs or your beer or whatever out in the garage and you put it out there, if the environmental temperature is too cold, it actually reduces the efficiency of the refrigerator. It's not manufactured to operate well within a range that's beyond the fringes of human habitation, like 60 to 90 something. As a secondary refrigerator or as a purpose-driven refrigerator for storing eggs or beer or whatever you want to put out there, most refrigerators don't do well out there. They'll consume more energy. The one we may end up getting is actually cold climate tempered, so it will function effectively at a much wider variety of environmental conditions. Some of the things I'd like to point out about refrigerators when you go shopping, and you'll see the better grades of the Tier 1 and Tier 2 energy efficient refrigerators. Double doors, the side-by-sides are out, they leak. They're more prone to leakage and they have more square surface inches to leak to begin with, so that's not a choice you want to make, and both sides are too skinny. It might be convenient, but it's not easy to put a pizza box, for example. You got to tip it up sideways. The other thing you want to avoid is through the door ice makers. Again, sounds very convenient, but that is a huge energy loss through that door, so they don't want that. The other thing is things like the French doors. Again, that's sort of a variation of the side-by-side. Some of them have multiple doors, like freezers, 2 freezer compartments that are separately operated. The gallery styles, I mean, all these very expensive refrigerators, which you'd think they could build energy efficiency into, they have difficulty because there's all these nosebleed energy leaks through the doors and the ice maker and all this kind of stuff. So that's out too. So basically what you are looking at is top freezer's fine. Operation and the grinding of the ice maker and the feeding, it takes energy. You can do it manually. You don't need the ice maker. It also takes up room within the box. And in some manufacturers, it's actually more efficient to have the freezer on the bottom. It's real convenient because all the food, 90% of your access is done at this level. So this is up here, and this is down there. So that works out real good for me, and in some manufacturers that's actually a slightly better energy efficient model. And the other thing to do is inside, you really don't want to pack that thing to the walls with stuff. You need to leave a little air around the edges. The shelves are designed to allow that space. If you stop at the edge of the shelf, they'll have a little space. But people tend to jam the food up even further, and the way it doesn't work is that it blocks airflow. And you don't want to do that, because when you start blocking airflow, it just makes the compressor work harder. It cools certain spots deeper than you want, and it keeps other spots warmer than you want, so it doesn't leave a consistent pattern in the box. The major job of the refrigerator, you would think, is to cool, but what it really is to remove moisture from the air. That's what it does first, and then it cools. Because you can't have cooling unless you have the moisture out first, and that's basically how a dehumidifier works, that's how a refrigerator works. It just gets the moisture out first, and then it cools. And if you are blocking the air path, it can't get the moisture out effectively, and the compressor is just going to work as hard as it can and stay on as long as it needs to get that job done. The refrigerator cycles several times an hour to be able to keep that cool, and that's why that kilowatt is so important for measuring something like this, because if I have a light bulb and I plug it in, I know it takes 60 watts, and every time that light's on, it's going to be taking 60 watts. If it lights on for an hour, it's going to be 60 watts an hour. If it's on for 24 hours, it's going to be 24 times 60. The refrigerator is not the same way. It comes on for maybe 5-6 minutes of compressor, and then it shuts off. And it's not using any energy while it shuts off, and then it comes back on. So that machine that we use, that kilowatt, is going to tell us cumulatively how many watts are being used in an hour, because it's not the full hour. It's only probably going to use 15 minutes out of the hour, or 18 minutes out of the hour. So at the end of the month, we have a cumulative total. That's how I figured out this is taking $97, or whatever that equivalent was in kilowatt hours. If you only operate it for an hour, you can extrapolate it into a week or a month, just doing it that way. Things like the toaster, that's the same thing. It's going to take everything it has every time it's on, and then when it's finished, it's going to shut off. But the refrigerator's on sort of a cyclical pattern, the same as the freezer. The microwave's the same way. It's not on constantly. It'll burst and shut off. Sometimes you'll hear it do that. The refrigerator is probably one of the most difficult choices to make because of all those factors.
The thermostat in there is sitting in the air, and every time you open up the door, the air temperature changes, so it causes the refrigerator to go on. Mm-hmm. So if you had not where you were blocking airflow, but if you were storing water in there, for example, if you had extra mass in there, then the temperature inside of that compartment will change less readily because you'll have that extra mass. So it actually, if you have an empty refrigerator, it's going to run more often than a full refrigerator. Just don't pack it all the way.
If you tend to have an empty refrigerator a lot, I would suggest putting water jugs in there. But the best solution is just to buy more food and keep the food in there, but don't overstuff it.
Having the thermostat exposed to air, if it was possible to put it in a liquid, if it was in some kind of a liquid base, so that every time you open the door, it's looking for the temperature of that liquid, then it's going to take more time for that liquid to change, which would keep the foods and everything basically at the same temperature. It might actually make it work less. I don't know.
The environment actually is the air that's in there, so you don't want to trick it by surrounding it in liquid, because that's going to be storing an environment that doesn't really reflect the true. You see what I'm saying?
Well, everything that's in your refrigerator is covered in a container, and there's some kind of moisture, and it's holding its own mass. Right. That's why I was thinking if it more reflected what was in there.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay. Yeah,
so this way, you may open the door and close it, but because of all that mass, that's going to bring the temperature back to where it was in the first place without the refrigerator doing its work. Yeah. So it just may be. I don't think I've ever seen that. It just came to me now as well. What if that thermostat wasn't in the air? I think there may actually be a product out there
that covers it up.
That
I don't.
You put around the thermostat that may
help
it from cycling
so frequently.
How could it cost less money to keep more mass at a normal temperature?
It's the flywheel.
Because the food in there is actually mass that holds the cold. And once you've removed most of that food, then it's just air that doesn't store the cold, so it just falls out, and then you have to replace it.
But once it disperses its cold back into the fridge, the fridge is going to spend extra long trying to get all that mass up to that temperature.
Yeah, it has to build it back up again.
So the first time that you put it in, it's going to take more energy, but it will hold it better over the long time.
If you're talking about something frozen, then if you're waiting until it all melts and then you have to refreeze it again, that's different than a quick opening of a door, and you're maintaining the temperature of the mass itself, and so you're just reheating or recooling the air.
Well, let's move on to the clothes washer. The washing machine is a very large energy user in the house. If you've got a family of 4 or 5, you get a substantial family, it can be pushing 40% of the use in some cases if you wash clothes a lot. That's an extreme example, but it can be that high. And you're not only using water, but energy, but you're using water. The choice I wanted to make, which was too expensive, the Staber, S-T-A-B-E-R, Staber Manufacturing in Ohio, they have a top-loading washer that turns into a horizontal axis machine. A horizontal axis machine is basically a front loader, and the reason that's more efficient is because the tumbling action does a lot of its agitation just by sheer tumbling, not by a physical paddle having to work its way through the water. So this thing's designed, you load it from the top, and then once it starts, it shifts. You don't see it, but it shifts in there, it does its wash, and then it comes back up again. It has a very highly efficient motor, and it's also designed to use about 22% less water, I believe. It's a fairly expensive machine, so we ended up not getting it, and we were looking at some other machines, and there are some good front loaders that are efficient and also water efficient. By the way, they're called HE washing machines, high efficiency. So that's all you have to look for. Energy Star HE washers. The front loaders are good. They tend to be a little bigger out front. They also tend to gather mildew around the rubber ring. They have a big heavy ring in the front that seals, because the door has to be sealed from the water leaking out. That ring tends to get mildewed. It has to be kept up with, and after a while it has to be replaced because it's beyond fixing. It's not super expensive. It just has to be done. So we're steering away from that. We're just now looking at 1 or 2 different top loaders that are just HE models that are Energy Star compliant. And now if you want a Staber, that's great. They'll take about 5 weeks to get because they sort of hand build each one. The front loaders are available pretty much any place, but you do have those drawbacks of the space constraints and the mildew issue. And you can keep it clean, and people use bleach or whatever cleaning solution to wipe that down after the wash is done, but it still gets after a while gets a little pecky with mildew. While we're here, we can talk about the dryer, and normally it vents directly. This perfectly bad idea. The dryer vent just exhausts into the crawl space. That's just moisture introduced into a place where the last thing you want is moisture. It already has enough moisture. What we've done is route the exit right through this little wall here. Happens to be a vent conveniently located. So basically take the little hood, little flapper protective exit vent that's on the end of this tube now, that's right into the crawl space, and just install it on the end there and put that extension pipe from under the floor here 11 feet over that way and hook up to that pipe. That gets the moisture out of the crawl space and resolves that whole issue.
Do you have a way to clean that pipe?
Annual maintenance on that. Unless it becomes an issue of clogging up, which is a concern. Yeah. Oh, it is. It can be a fire problem. The bend here is very gradual. You can disconnect it here from the floor and just actually reach in there with a brush and get the lint out from up here, and then you can look down through here and see if it's a straight shot and see, or you can just take a shop vac and put it on blow as part of the draft mitigation, which actually is part of the exhaust resolution of the dryer. This door was put in. This is just airflow control issue. This door was never here. It was just an open space. In the summer, this can become a really convenient airflow route if this door is kept open. By leaving this door open, letting the air flow through the house and exit up through the vent. So this is a little bonus space over the garage. So I didn't finish framing that. I'm thinking of putting a transom in there that's actually opening and closing. So when the door is closed in the winter, as soon as you open this door, all this hot air wants to find its way out. It doesn't go there or there, it just goes right out of there. So what we've done is, actually block that off, and it just sort of stops that flow. It doesn't stop it dead, but it slows it down considerably.
That had been open, all the cold from the attic.
Yeah, and that just introduces it right into not just here, but here, because it's warm. On a light like this that is used longer than most, food prep, and spends a lot of time in the kitchen here, I guess, we ended up installing the LED light, which is brighter and cooler than most people would like, but it really sends out a lot of light. The other one had two 40-watt bulbs, and this one's going to be the equivalent of 15 watts, I think it is. I think it's called the Utilitech. It's a Lowe's brand, standard 4-foot fixture, nothing special. This range hood is new. Mainly, that's part of the moisture mitigation process. The old one, it has a filter, but it just sends it right back out here, and it just does this, and then you clean the filter every once in a while. This new one, when we're finished with it, is going to come up right through the top and just go out through the roof, and that will get all that moisture, all that cooking moisture, right out of the house. And for the few moments that you're ending up doing that every day, cooking your spaghetti or any of the moisture you cook, it is a loss of heat energy because it's sucking the heat out, but the reduction in moisture overshadows the loss of heat. That's because it's not on constantly.
Can you measure humidity, or is there a preferred humidity level?
It's all. The human humidity level is comfort range is something like 50, 45 or 50, something like that. I don't remember what all that. And it's different with different people, but in some part, like the Southwest, it's down in the
way. I'm talking about as far as affecting the structure.
Oh, yeah, definitely up in the 70. When you get up above 70 or 75, yeah. Oh, definitely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And in a shower or something, you can have 100% humidity, and if you don't have an exhaust fan, that's really an issue in that room, especially with the insulation getting moldy. It's a 210 cubic foot per minute fan, which is more than adequate. Most of them have 360 or somewhere in there. This is 210, which is really perfectly adequate, but also far less energy consumptive. And the lighting, you have your cooking lighting, and that bulb in there is only, I think, a 7-watt bulb. It's a compact fluorescent. We'll put an LED in probably. And then this other setting, which the bulb didn't come with it for some reason. That's going to use a little 3-watt, just a little night light. So you can always have, if you just want a little night light for, coming through the room or something, you can do that. But this was a good choice because it's not only high efficiency. I think it was $178. High efficiency blower unit, but it also has the efficiency lighting with 2 settings. So that's good. That's an Air King. The thermostat. That's the other thing. That's in here. That used to be just a conventional up and down thermostat. Honeywell, set it at 74. It says 74, and then when the furnace gets up to that point, it shuts it off. This, for $188 installed. The man come out here and put it in, and plus the cost of the unit, including the cost of the unit and all that, we have a 7-day pre-programmable thermostat, so that when you have a schedule, it's especially good when you have a schedule and you follow a regular schedule, which is most people, you can set this thing, and we have set it, to come on at a certain time of the day, stay on for as long as you need it, and go off at a certain temperature level. And then when it defers to the second tier, so let's say in the morning, Pat wants to get up at 7 o'clock and he wants the temperature to be comfortable at, say, 62. Let's just say that. So it'll be 62 for, say, 2 hours, and then after 2 hours it drops down to 55 for the whole rest of the day, and then at 5:30 it comes on back up to 62, stays there till 8 o'clock, and then it drops down because even though he'll stay up later than 8 o'clock, it'll take a while for the house to, to cool down a little bit. So he sets it that way. Weekends he may not be here, so he'll have this thing set. So on starting at for Friday at 5 o'clock, say it'll shut down to 55 and stay at 55 till Sunday evening, or Monday morning, and then it'll go defer back to his normal schedule. And you can it's pre-programmable at several tiers or functions, like three or four during every 24-hour cycle. So you can do a number of things within each day's hour, each day's cycle. You can set it for several different time periods in there, and it's a 7-day thing. So you can make it, you can make Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday one thing, and Thursday something different, and Friday something totally different, and Saturday and Sunday, all different. So, or you can make every day different. So it's a really good investment installed for $188. It's because that saves a considerable amount of energy in just leaving the thermostat at, say, 63 all day, or even coming and turning it down in the morning and going out to work and then coming back and turning it back up and then maybe forgetting, and you have a day where it's stayed at 63 the whole time, because you don't forget when it's cold and you come in. you don't forget because you know it's cold and you go, oh, I have to fix that. But when you leave, it's comfortable and you forgot, and you will forget. And so, it's it just does it all for you. It's it's one of the better choices.
I think too, the theory that requires more energy to heat it, the fluctuations.
We're not pulling it down to 32 degrees. We're only bringing it down to maintenance at 55. So there's really not that much of a window that it's operating in.
So there is some point where it's a break even.
Yeah. When it gets down, when you're asking it, if we were to set that down to say 35, just above freezing, and it got down, to that point, it would take a lot more. It would take more energy to get it from 35 up to comfort, and by that time, you may be ready to go to bed again. So it's like it takes a while. Plus, it takes more energy. So yeah, there is a break even.
I keep feeling we're too cold. So just recently I popped it up to 71. It had been at 65, I think, and you could see it's already in 15 minutes gone up 3 degrees. So
let me just ask you a question also. Yeah? I have an issue with mine because my apartment is not that well insulated. I used to have a standard thermostat that was mercury, and there was probably a change of 5 degrees before it would kick on.
Right.
It would go down 5 degrees, and then the mercury would change and it would kick it back on. So I got a digital one. It is a 3/4 of a degree difference. Every time it changes 3/4 of a degree, it kicks back on. So it'll reach temperature and then drop. Even though it's telling me that it drops a degree, it's actually dropping 3/4 of a degree, and then it'll kick back on. So what I have is on, off, on, off, on.
The delta T is set too narrow. You need that band needs to be widened. I don't know if it's possible to do that or just buy a new thermostat, but that's the issue. It needs to be broadened.
So this one, you can widen that in this one?
No, it doesn't. It's probably programmed at the factory that it doesn't. It already has that wider built into it. It sounds like you're almost either defective or just it wasn't designed very well.
According to my air conditioning guy, he said that's
the way
that
they want it.
It's made up. So I'm wondering if something like this has a range that you can put it in where, let's say 72 is the high and 69 is the low, and it will. So this would prevent it from cycling.
To be honest with you, I don't know, but I would hazard a very reliable guess that it's not a consumer adjustable feature. It's something that they'd have to do. The technician would have to do. If he could do it. Because there's actually another cover. You pull this cover off, and then there's another cover behind it. And that's the secret one. You can get in there and fool with it.
Have you found in some areas that the power factor really isn't that good, and does that really mess up somebody's electricity? And should they be looking to some of these devices that you can put on the lines to correct power factor?
If you really get into the specifications on motor-driven issues, you can choose something that has a more attractive power factor, and that's really about all that we can do. I mean, if you were getting into it from a real engineering standpoint, you can improve that, but that's sort of beyond the scope of what we're what really basic things that the average person's going to do, which is sort of where we are with it.
So if you saw it on the meter that the power factor was off, then that might be something
to look at.
But otherwise,
I wouldn't worry about it. Because as I said, that's mainly the efficiency of the device, how it's using the power is given, basically. The TV and some of this other stuff here is definitely on the power strip, because that can be turned off and shut the power off completely to the device. So nothing, the warming circuit is out of the picture. It's not consuming any power whatsoever, and that's for a whole weekend. That's one weekend, but that's 4 times a month, and that's so many times, 52 times a year. So it's not much, but it is 52 times when you multiply it by 52. So that's something to think about. In this back bedroom here, we have a old-fashioned, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 2.5 gallons per minute flushing, which is unacceptable and very sort of an older commode. And the same with the water faucet in there. The sink faucet in there is probably at 2 gallons a minute or more. So that's what you don't want to do. And what we've done is the third bathroom has a special dual flush mechanism, which we're going to look at now. The normal acceptable acceptability level for a toilet is 1.6 gallons per flush. That's if you just go out and buy a modern toilet, it's most likely going to be 1.6 gallons per flush, which is a lot better than the 2. They have measured some of the older style, really heavy old porcelain toilets you might find in older buildings that were built in the 30s and 40s and we really haven't changed all the plumbing. They'll use 4 to 5 gallons of flush, and that was in those days. They just didn't care. Probably didn't realize. These newer toilets have been designed so that you still get the flushing action. In fact, probably a better flushing action, and use considerably less water. So where normal, modern, conventional purchase is going to be at 1.6 gallons, this is a high efficiency toilet, so we're using 1.28 gallons, which is, not...
That's the California standard.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, so we're down to that level. And this particular, all the toilets are Kohlers. I like Kohler toilets. They're well designed. In this particular model, they have a gravity system. It's exceptionally well designed, so it will get rid of solid waste, especially without using a lot of water. So this particular thing is really sort of unique. It's a dual flush system. We have a single handle, but it's actually split. So for liquid, we have just this outside lever, and that'll do the liquid. For solid, you push this one, which pushes down both of them and lets more water in. So it just goes very quiet. Well, except for that, but it's generally very quiet. It fills up, and it's also at ADA compliant comfort height, which is about 1.5 inches higher than most other toilets. So it's it's very attractive. It's easy to install, and it was no big deal. But it does use considerably less. Now they do have micro flush toilets, which are not generally available in stores, but you have to order them. But they can be down well below the 1.28. They can be down to like 0.8, 0.8% of a gallon. The issue with some of the lower you go, the less consumptive you get issues with flushability. And in those cases, especially in some of the early designs, it didn't flush all the way the first time, so people end up flushing 2 and 3 times. So that defeats the whole purpose of the low flush. So that's the newer ones are designed to be so much better. While we're in here, I'll just show you. For about $7, I ended up buying a pack of 6 Niagara, which is a brand name, low flow sink fixtures. Just remove the old fixture and put this on, and it brings the water flow down to 1.5 gallons a minute. The shower head would generally be about 2.5 gallons a minute, something like that, or less. These faucets for the sink and the kitchen, whatever, would be 1.5. Still very nice force and a good pattern, but not as much water being used. They put more air into it, but it still feels good. So that's very inexpensive.
So shower heads, you want to shoot for about 2.5 gallons per minute?
Well, generally, they'll range. The one I actually picked, I didn't like, so I didn't put it in yet. We're probably going to replace it with a Niagara, same manufacturer as this, but it has a better saving capability of water saving, and it also has several different additional settings for the type of spray pattern. This one only had 3, I think, and the other one, which I thought I was getting, but it didn't have it, so we ended up just getting the Delta, I think it was. It's perfectly fine. It's just that I think we can do better. The water heater itself is an efficient model to begin with, which is what was installed by the manufacturer, and then on top of that they've wrapped it in an R11 water jacket, which you can buy water heater jacket. I think they run anywhere from $16 to $40 at any builder's supply store, depending on the thickness of the jacket. But that just holds that water. If this hot water heater is shut off, it will hold its heat. It'll allow you to take a comfortable shower 5 days into really 3 to 5 days into the future.
Well, I see that the bottom really isn't wrapped. Is that a really big deal, or?
No, it just wasn't done. I left it open because Pat had asked me to look at whether we can control. Well, we can. Whether I can wire it so only one element works, or we have an ability to switch between one and the other. Between dual use or single use. So I wanted to expose it so I could get in there and look.
So is there any kind of a rating you can look at to see if you have an efficient water heater?
Well, yes, the same Energy Star, same thing.
Energy Star again.
Yeah, again.
But if I looked at mine at home, I wouldn't know.
Well, it'd say on there what the you know, you have your obviously your gallonage, and then your they all have like pretty conventional 3,000 or 4,500 watt elements if they're electric, and it'll just when you shop for a new one, it'll have the Energy Star rating, because that's basically tied into the insulation value of the jacket of the casing. Now, what I've done here on Pat's request is we were going to put in a timer, sort of like the thermostat has its timing cycle. We were going to put in a timer that he could set at four different time, well, anywhere up to 4 different time settings. So if for example he knew he wants to take his showers were almost always between the hours of 6 and 8 in the morning, he'd have that thing come on at say 5:30 and shut off at 7:30 or something like that, or 8 or whatever, and then the rest of the day it would just be off. Then at the last, the price of that was about $100, and he said, "Why don't we just put a switch in?" So I installed a switch for him. So it just took it just interrupts the power supply, goes through the switch, and goes back to the water heater. So now and it's visible under the cabinet by the dryer. So if he wants to go away for the weekend, just flip the switch off, and it's shut off totally. It doesn't have to be on. There's very little. I mean, we could leave it off for probably 2 weeks. I would bet that after 2 weeks, the water will still be lukewarm, just sitting in there. So now, as an option to that, we did not install, but there are available point of use water heaters. There's a flash heater that's installed very close to the tap, and when the cold water hits that thing, it instantaneously heats the water to the proper temperature and sends it through the faucet, and it's warm by the time it gets out. The run between the water heater and the point of use where you're going to use it at the faucets is very important, because that is where a lot of the heat loss occurs. So not only do we need to wrap those pipes securely in foam insulation, but in more for new construction, when you actually have the ability to plan. But if you can keep those runs shorter, the less distance that water has to travel, the less the heat it's going to lose through its travel path. So when the house is already built, we don't have a whole lot of choice, really. But when the house is new, you can centrally locate the water tank and the bathrooms, if you can, to keep the runs as short as possible. So.
In nursing homes, we have recirculating pumps.
Yeah, and that's another. We were just going to mention that. Diane actually showed me an article which I read through from Fine Home Building that had, if you can keep that water going, and so it doesn't have a chance to get cold in the pipe, it just keeps it constantly. Those pumps are designed to use very, very little energy, so the energy towards that is a lot better than losing heat through the water. So that's the other thing to do is again, in new construction, you could actually use the drainage from your dishwasher or your showers or whatever. Your supply pipes are surrounded in the warm water coming out of your used appliances, so the hot water is being used to some extent to warm the cold water coming in, and that's another strategy.
So that would perhaps do better for our comfort anyway,
yeah,
in terms of using water.
That especially in a situation of that far bathroom, all you need to have is a gas line to supply it or an electric outlet to supply it. Okay. And that involves an electrician or a gas guy, but it's not. Gas is usually a little harder to install, but it's easy to wire a 220 volt line over there and just put that point of use heater right there. Yeah, the strategy is to trap air between the exterior glass of the outside window and the inside where we have our tempered environment. So this is just basically a framed glass unit, standard double strength glass with a thin frame around it, and that just gets sealed up against a little ledge built into the window here, and allows us a small air gap between the existing window and the inner glass pane. And they're just held in with little clips here, which can be removed. So in the summer, if he wants ventilation, we just clip them out and remove the whole window, inner window. So that's a very low cost strategy, and it's
where do you get them?
You have to have them made. Actually, these normally they'd be available through the manufacturer of the manufactured home, but they are no longer available. So I had to go to an aluminum carport and green and what do you call that? Sunroom supplier, and they make them. They make them for you.
Didn't you say they might be as much as $100?
Yes, they can. Well, he wanted about $100 a piece for them, which is a little pricey. So I also checked with Marvin and some of the other companies. They're giving me some prices on the custom sized normal storm windows, which does the same thing. Same deal. All you need is a frame and a glass, and then we can seal it with rubber stick-on foam or something like that. It's a water-saving fixture that has a variety of spray patterns and all that, but the Niagara version has probably 3 times more availability as far as the spray patterns, and it's equally conservative of water, but it may be a little more convenient and more options to it. So it's a little more expensive, but it's not all that much more expensive. And as I said, some of the sink fixtures can be, they can reduce the water usage in the sink down to faucet usage down to like half a gallon a minute. Many of those are actually flowing at over 2 gallons a minute for say a bathroom faucet, which is way too much. You don't need that much for that simple washing task. So by choosing, I think like I said, for $7 we got six little fixture fittings, and actually many municipalities and sometimes like energy saving programs they may have through the city or through the state or whatever, they'll actually give you the little fixtures to fit on the end of the faucet just for free, just to save water. So that's always worth looking at, including the shower heads. They have some simple shower heads they just give away. This Delta fixture can reduce the shower usage consumption down from 1 to 1.5 gallons a minute. So that's that's something to think about. As another feature we talked about, and we may not be able to buy it, but we have to build it, is actually a hand washing station that's built into the toilet tank, to the top of the toilet tank, because that supply water in the tank is clean, potable water. I mean, it's just being fed from the same source as your drinking water. It gets fed to the bottom of the toilet tank where the water's stored, and then ends up going through the mechanism for flushing. So instead of letting it go straight to the mechanism, we divert it through a faucet installed in the top of the tank and a bowl. The manufacturer makes a toilet tank top that already has a bowl in it, but we are going to put on a ceramic or maybe copper bowl that will be attached to the top of the tank. The water will go through the faucet. You can wash your hands. When you flush, you can actually wash your hands because the water is going to be feeding through the faucet, over your hands, into the bowl, drain down the bowl, and right back to where it would have normally gone into the flushing mechanism. So we're just diverting the water, using it, and sending it right back where it came from. So it's you're able to save that much more water. The water you normally would have used in the sink to wash your hands, we can use right at the toilet tank. And it has nothing to do with, this is before it goes into the bowl itself, so it's not like you're using toilet bowl water to wash your hands. This is fresh, clean water that you normally would use for the, just the flushing tank part of the toilet. The only kind of power that can be stored is direct current, which is DC, and that's what we use in batteries, and that's the storage mechanism, is the battery. So the inverter is an electronic device that takes the DC power and converts it to AC power, to user-friendly AC power. And there's a couple of factors. In the power, if it's not a very good inverter, it will not make that conversion cleanly. So the cycles, we operate on a 60 cycle. You see the plug sometimes, or the back of an appliance, it'll say 60 cycle or 60 HZ. If it's running at 61, it's going to be too much by that fraction. Electric motors are very sensitive to that. Computers are very sensitive. So that 60 cycle wave is very important for sensitive equipment like computers and refrigerator compressors and televisions and stuff like that. Depends on what you're powering. They have inverters that plug into your car battery, and you can use a little TV off of that. That's the little one. If you want to drive your refrigerator and a few lights and your well pump, then you're talking about eight deep cycle batteries and a fairly large 3,000 watt inverter or something like that. And they'll make inverters up to, they make them up to 8,000 watts. I mean, they're big. They can be big. The little car ones can be $40, and the bigger ones can be well in excess of $4,000. That device alone is what kicked solar power into the mainstream. Because without that device, everybody would still be running on, you'd have to be buying DC appliances like for boats, marine appliances, and other RVs and stuff, which aren't particularly, they're not really high quality. They just work. And you have to buy 12-volt lights and 12-volt everything. And with the inverter, you can just use your regular old stuff. You know, it just works perfectly.
So you would say, I'd like to be able to run this, this, and this for 5 days.
Yes.
And you would define what you would want.
You'd look at those appliances and you turn it around or look in the spec sheet of it and find out, well, this one uses 1,500 watts, and this one uses 300 watts, and this light uses 100 watts, and this charger here uses 150 watts. You add them all up, and for something like a refrigerator, you also have to, or a motor, you have to take into account the surge draw, because it will draw up to 6 times more than its normal running wattage just in starting for that split second. But once it's started, you're okay. But you still have to factor in that first fraction of a second. So normally it's not 6 times, but it could be. But it's normally usually 2.5, something like that. So then you add all that up, including the surge factor, and then you figure out that your batteries and your inverter have to be at least at that level to be able to handle all those things you want to run. Sinelco or Backwoods Solar Electric that I explained to you, they'll have a simple formula for calculating all that stuff and figure out what they call days of autonomy, how many days that system will be able to operate without any external power being fed into it. And that includes they don't want the battery to draw from 100% charge down to 0. They usually go from 100 down to 50 before they call it needs to be recharged. It'll go down to as low as 20 without hurting the batteries, but that's not a place you really want to be. 50 is a good comfortable range. 100 down to 50 and then back up again to 100. So
that's where you play around with the propane generator.
Yeah, exactly. Extended, and whether you want to be charging, that kind of thing. So any other questions, comments, or specifics?